Today, I'm going to continue in the book Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, and I'm on chapter 3, which is about the guru. And where I left off then begins with the stages of meeting the spiritual friend. The first stage is he compares it with like going to a supermarket, that you are shopping around and you have all these different choices. There are so many different gurus out there, that have all kinds of different uh, training and reputations and so on and so forth. And you're just wondering, what are you going to bring home? What is it that you're looking for? And then the next stage is, he describes it as like going to court. And what this means is that when you're in court, that the judge and the opposing attorney know everything about you, and you feel kind of uncomfortable. So at this stage, there's a certain embarrassment that you have because you realize that the guru knows about you things that you don't want him to know or her to know. And then the third stage is that you see him or her as a bit like a cow that's happy in a pasture. Just calm. You feel comfortable with the guru and so forth. And the last stage is seeing the guru like you are walking on a path, and there is a stone on the path. That is the guru, and you walk right by. This is a very advanced stage. You could say a completion stage. You just don't even pay much attention. He then uses another analogy, and I at first was going to try to line these up with the first, but I decided it's best not to look at these independent of each other. So the second analogy is like a love affair. And the first stage is the courtship. And here you are trying to impress the guru. You're trying to attract the guru. You're trying to impress him, you or her. But on the other hand, there is also this element of hate, kind of love, hate going back and forth. And you have this impulse to run away. So it's an uncomfortable relationship. And then as the relationship deepens, it becomes more, in his words, substantial. That this is where you start seeing that wanting to be close or to be distant from the guru is just a game, and you really have the choice whether to play the game or not. So that's an important, you might say, an important development, where you start getting to have a little more knowledge about yourself and your approach and so forth. The third then is, he calls it the honeymoon stage, that you become insignificant. He says it's a bit like being totally engrossed in a movie. where you kind of become one with the movie. It's very intense. It's becomes very creative, actually. And that whether it's hot or cold relationship at that particular moment or whatever, you just accept it. It's like you just accept the movie for whatever is going on in the movie. Then after that, the next stage is the marriage. And this is where you face your own situation and your own psychology. The honeymoon is over. Now you kind of go beyond seeing the guru as an individual. And he talks about the universality of the guru. Or in other words, you see that he has qualities or she has qualities that all good gurus have, all good teachers have, and that everything in your life becomes part of this relationship. It's not like sometimes you are, the guru is there and sometimes the guru is not there, or that you've got a secular life and then you've got a spiritual life, that it becomes all inclusive. The next stage is, he calls it gaining independence from your teacher, your spiritual friend. And what happens here is that everything becomes your teacher, that you have an internal teacher and you have an external teacher. You're opening up to whatever happens, whatever you are experiencing. And as an example of this, he talked about the story of Milarepa when he was meditating in a cave, and he went out to gather either food or firewood, and he passed out, and when he came to, he started, you might say, crying for Marpa's help. And Marpa appeared in the sky riding a snow lion and said, quote, "You understand the Dharma, so continue to practice meditation." In other words, it's in your ballpark. It's up to you. Don't call me to help you when it's up to you. So this was the stage that Marpa was encouraging Milarepa to enter. And so he went back to his cave and was full of demons. And at first he tried to scare them out. They were scaring him. He tried to scare them out by using wrathful mantra and other techniques. And some of them left, but many of them stayed. And finally, he said to the remaining demons in his cave, he kind of ran into the cave and said, "Okay, here I am. Do what you have to do with me." And he just plain surrendered to the situation. And when he did that, then he accepted them, he opened up to them, and they disappeared. Quote from the book, he had learned to identify with the universal qualities of the guru rather than solely on relating to Marpa as an individual person. So the guru can be external or can be internal. If it's internal, it's your own basic intelligence, your Buddha nature, your Yeshe, your primordial wisdom. There's lots of different names for it. He says it's a bit like your own shadow is watching you. And so with this internal guru, things become very, very creative. You become very open to the present, whatever is happening right now. And he says that you see the expression of the face of the guru wherever you look. And he finishes this chapter with this quote: once you have stepped your foot onto the path, you have really done it. You cannot step back. There is no way of escaping. I remember reading that the first time, and it is true that once you step on the path, once you start, you've made a commitment, and you can't go back. So to finish the chapter, there are a few questions and answers. The first one was about Marpa being a householder and a farmer and so forth, and how could he undo all these other things? Well, he was doing that. And so Trungpa Rinpoche says that he underwent tremendous discipline and training in India. And this is an interesting quote. The basic idea of asceticism, leading a life according to the Dharma, is to be fundamentally sane. So he is talking about you don't have to be a yogi like Milarepa to be a good practitioner and even practice asceticism. And so fundamentally sane means free of delusion, free of thinking that you are a separate, unique individual. It is a state of at least experiencing egolessness. And he continues to say that a yogi in a cave with nothing could be deluded and have all kinds of fantasies about what he or she is doing in the cave. And even though outer appearance would appear to be a good practitioner, that is not necessarily the case. What is important is what is inside when we get into the Vajrayana. So this is a very important point, that Marpa's wisdom was not artificial, and he did not distinguish between the mundane or the profane and the spiritual. For him, it was all spiritual. He didn't try to be someone that he wasn't. And it's interesting, I remember a quote of Milarepa, that at one point he said, "I can no longer meditate." And what he meant by that was that he could no longer not meditate. And therefore, there was no distinction between meditation and non-meditation. And it's a bit like that. So the final part of this question really jumped out at me. And that was that he talks about fanatics trying to win people by coming on very strong and frantic. And what came to mind, I hope this doesn't upset anybody, but what came to mind is the way people got so frantic about the election being stolen after the presidential election last year. And my advice, and Trungpa Rinpoche's advice too, is if a person's coming on strong and frantic, go the other direction, or at least don't believe them. So the next question is about the stages that one goes through. And this was about when one first experiences true ordinariness. It is extraordinary because it's the first time, even though it's very ordinary. And so, again, what came to my mind was a teaching that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche gave about people that experience emptiness for the first time. He said that they have a shocked look on their face. And I believe that that's what Trungpa Rinpoche is talking about here, that when you first experience egolessness, this true ordinariness, it is so different, it's so ordinary that it's extraordinary and it's shocking. On the other hand, he says it's precise, it's clean, it's intense, and it's like a discovery. And then it becomes ordinary again. So that was how we answered the second question about the stages you go through. Now, the third question is, how do you take off your suit of armor? And a very simple answer. He says, you don't question yourself. You don't watch yourself. You just do it. And he of all things, he used the example of vomiting. He said, you just do it. You don't try to hold it in or keep it down. You don't tense up. You just relax and let go. And so that is how you do it. You just quit watching yourself. You just do it. You quit having thoughts. You just do it. And then the fourth question is, when life's situations become the guru, you have no choice. It doesn't matter if it's painful or pleasurable. You just open up, you experience it. You experience it directly and fully. And that's how he ends that chapter. So let me see here. Can you pause for a second? Now I'm going to start the next chapter that is titled Initiation. And in the beginning, there is a line drawing of Talopa. And above his head is Vajradhatu. Vajradhara. And the point of this drawing is that Talopa practiced to the point where he actually received teachings from Vajradhara, Mahamudra teachings. Our Mahamudra lineage supplication begins with Vajradhara or Dorje Chang, and then Telo, Naro, Marpa, and so forth. And so that's what that picture is about. It's about depicting initiation, receiving a transmission from the guru. So he starts out by, what does initiation mean? And he talks about mistaken approaches. The first one is wanting to get credentials from someone. And you're looking at that person as having credentials. That was a word that he used a lot in a pejorative way, this idea of credentials. So anyway, that is an incorrect approach, that you go to a guru wanting to receive something from that person and thinking that they have the credentials to give you what you need. Another wrong approach is, he called it like joining a club. And he didn't mention this, but I'm going to add, doing it for social reasons, because you don't want to be with some other people. Maybe you're lonely. He talks about feeling worthless, and again, starved for more credentials. So, quote, true initiation involves dealing honestly and straightforwardly with one's spiritual friend and ourselves. So we have to make some effort to expose ourselves and our self-deceptions. So he uses the term abhisheka. The Tibetan term is wang, W-A-N-G, and it means initiation. It means a meeting of two minds. And there are formal wangs that probably most of you have received, perhaps here at the Hay River Center or at other centers. And you will have a Vajra master, and there is a chanting, you do visualizations, you come up, or someone goes around and touches you with various objects. They might be pictures, a tray with a mala on it, and so on and so forth. And you get these empowerments this way. But this is just the external ceremony. What's really happening is that you're committing to opening up. You're committing to exposing your self-deception. You are committing yourself to becoming a proper vessel to receive what the guru has to give. And so he has an analogy here. It's interesting, the analogies that he uses, by the way. I think that many of his analogies, he just plain came up with himself. They do not come from ancient Tibetan teachings. So he says it's like a doctor knows that you're sick, and he might even have to come and take you away from home by force. and operate on you without anesthesia. So there could be an element of pain here, but there is real communication that is going on. But what's happening here is the guru or the spiritual friend is actually touching your life, touching you, who you really are. And so he says things like donations, doing volunteer work for a center or for a guru, even being involved in various ways with a guru. None of this means you've committed to openness. And this is an important point, that all of this, again, is external, and what he is talking about is internal. Committing to open yourself up, not only to the guru, but to yourself, so that you can see yourself more clearly. So he says, again, these are some incorrect approaches. Is maybe you go to the guru for initiation because you want to be on the right side of things. You want to be a success. You have all kinds of perhaps personal goals that have nothing to do with true spirituality. So what you need is to know that you are exposed, and then avoid trying to rationalize the situation. He says what frequently happens is that you rationalize the situation. You make more thoughts and more thoughts and more thoughts, and more layers and more layers and more layers, and explanations about how wonderful it was, and da 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 da. There's a term again that is used frequently these days, and I'm going to throw this in. It's you're gaslighting yourself. You're deceiving yourself, and we need to avoid this. He says eventually it gets too overwhelming and you give up, and that you just realize that this is just mental gymnastics, mental bull. It's just too many choices, too many things to think about, too many directions to go in, too many excuses, and on and on and on and on. And so eventually you give up. Give up all the complications and you just allow space. You just give in. And that's when the empowerment takes place. When you just give in, give up with all the mental stuff. He says that at this point, you've actually been forced to stop, to really stop. That maybe you, at this point, or before you get to that point, you start questioning what is spirituality. You start questioning dogmas and beliefs. They start going out the window, and so forth. Again, as we're getting to this point, he talks about a few detours. One is that we could see spirituality as exotic and take attached to superficial trappings. Oh, the beautiful sculptures, the beautiful Tonka paintings. Oh, it's so nice to be in a Tibetan puja. It's so different. And eventually this starts to be feeling false, that you're not connecting with the teachings. And so you need to go back to this meeting of the two minds. So he then talks about the maras of self-deception. And the one that he talks about is what is usually referred to as the celestial child. And this means attachment to sense pleasures. And here he's talking about being attached to the pleasant feelings and thoughts and interpretations that we add on to our experience of whatever dharma we are doing, whether it be a puja or an empowerment, even a teaching, that somehow or another you keep adding all this additional stuff that transforms it into something totally different. Again, I have seen people meditate with smiles on their face the whole time, where they're obviously blissed out. You know, that's the celestial child. It might be that sometimes when you meditate, you do have some moments of bliss, but if you go for an hour with a smile on your face, I think that's called blissed out. That's the celestial child. So he says that there has to be this precision. There has to be this sharpness in an actual abhisheka or wang, that the meeting takes place naturally. Quote, both the instructor and the student meet in a state of openness in which they both realize that openness is the most insignificant thing in the whole world. It is completely insignificant, truly ordinary, absolutely nothing. End of quote. That's when the actual meeting of the two minds, the student and the spiritual friend, happened. And he talks about the term Tamo-Geshepa. I heard that a lot when I was studying with Trungpa Rinpoche's Sangha. And it basically means ordinary mind. It's this ordinary mind that at first when it's experienced is extraordinary, but then you get used to it and it is ordinary again. So eventually we have to give up. We have to give up trying to be something special. So that's how he finishes this chapter. I've just got a few question and answers. And then I will open it up to questions from you. So the first is, I can't get away from securing myself. And Rinpoche's answer is, you're watching yourself, watching yourself, watching yourself, watching yourself, watching yourself, watching yourself. I added ad infinitum for those of you that like Latin. In other words, we're just making things worse. And he says, just stop caring. Drop the whole thing. Just drop the whole thing. Quit being concerned about it. Just be. Give up the idea of security. If you can see the irony of having overlapping structure that are pointless. And if you can see that, get a big grin on your face when you see that irony. And then the second and last question is, would you speak this way to students of a different nationality? And basically he says no, that this is directed to Americans specifically, but it could include people from any highly developed country. The question was, can you describe the difference between Tibetan Buddhism and this complete emotional honesty? And there really is not any difference, that this is part of Tibetan Buddhism. And it is that we have to open up to ourselves. We have to get to know ourselves. We have to understand where our hang-ups are, where our attachments are, where our aversion is. We have to know our ego games, all these layers. And basically, in Tibetan Buddhism, which is a very, very powerful path, it is, as he's talking about, you get to the point where you just plain let go and accept what's happening. You don't put layers of security on it. You don't put ego games and so on and so forth on it. You just directly experience things and let what you're experiencing be your guru. And so what's happening is your inner guru, your inner wisdom, your ordinary mind, your yeshe, primordial wisdom, many words for it, that takes over, and the situation and your internal wisdom is the teacher. The follow-up was, it sounds like that we're going towards the end of this self-monitoring process. And in a way, he talked about this in one of the first chapters. This is why spiritual materialism is such a problem, that the path leads to basically ego suicide, where you realize that it was a big illusion all along, and your ego is gone, and ego doesn't like that. And so that's the conflict. And so the final stages are, and these are final stages of realizing that this whole ego game is pointless. It's an illusion. It is delusion. And you, okay, enough. And it might only be for a brief instant that you experience that. But that is that when you experience this ordinariness, and it's extraordinary, but over time and practice, it becomes more and more ordinary. So the question then was, talk a little bit more about innocence and this childlike spontaneity. And these great masters behave spontaneously. I remember going to this one, I believe it was Nalanda out in Seattle, Washington, is where Punlap Rinpoche's headquarters are. And they had a building next to the main building. And that's where the lamas, the great visiting teachers, would stay. And some of the members of that Sangha talked about how when the lamas were in there, the building echoed with laughter. That these great lamas have this quality of almost childlike innocence, wonder, and so forth. And a story that comes to mind that I heard, this was about Khenpo Soprim Gyamtso. And this was from a translator that worked with him in, I think it was Paris, somewhere in France anyway. And there was an amusement park somewhere in the area of where the temple was, or the center was. And that, so Khenpo Soprim Gyamtso and his translator would be working, and then all of a sudden Khenpo Soprim Gyamtso would get up and say, let's go to the amusement park. And he would just about run to the amusement park with his robes on in the wind. He was not walking. They would get in the bumper cars. And then Khenpo Soprim Gyamtso would tell his translator, now meditate on emptiness. And they would start, and Khenpo Soprim Gyamtso, nobody ever hit him. End of story. But this was a reoccurring story. He did not visit there just once. And so the point is that there is this childlike wonder that if you really look around and experience completely, fully, directly, whatever it is that's going on, it's amazing from the point of ordinary mind. We just had about a foot of snow here. And now a lot of people would think this is going to make driving hell. Some people would think, I got a lot of shoveling to do. But if you looked at it closely, even if you did have to drive later or shovel later, or just finish driving or just finish shoveling, if you looked at the moment with the sun out, you noticed individual flakes glistening in the sunlight. And it's like that. All of a sudden, your world becomes just wonderful. You're like a child experiencing it for the first time. In fact, one of the Mahamudra instructions are to be like a young child that goes into one of these highly elaborately decorated Tibetan shrine rooms for the first time, and it's just, they're speechless, they're awed. So the question was brought up. This sounds like, and actually this is more of a statement, this sounds like this is a very high level of trust in oneself. Trungpa Rinpoche didn't mention it in this chapter or the previous chapters, but he talked about primordial confidence, that part of our qualities are this confidence that goes beyond feeling secure. It is a confidence that has always been there, and it's, in a way, it's beyond trust. It's beyond trust and not trust. It's just tapping into that you have this confidence and you're not questioning. Did I do it the right way, or could I have done it a different way? You did it the way you did it, and that's the way it was done. You just, in a way, you let yourself be. You be who you are. Marpa was who he was, a householder, children, married, farm, going down to India, 3 different trips for I don't know, a total of perhaps as many as 13 years. He did what he did. At first, of course, he did not have this primordial confidence, but that's where this is leading. Again, we're talking about fruition stage here, not, well, next week you're going to have primordial confidence. So the question is that, first of all, many people are unhappy with who they are. And this seems to be saying, just be who you are, and have a certain confidence about being who you are, and don't get hung up about it. And now I did this Tong Len exercise a little while ago, and that was intended for that very purpose, to learn how to accept yourself as you are, with all your warts, all your flaws, not being satisfied with it, but at least caring for yourself and not being ashamed of who you are, and developing you might say, the aspiration to have this unconditional love, caring, and trust for yourself. When we have that, then we can extend this to other people and into the world. To sum it all up, when we meditate, ideally, we just let ourselves be. We do as little as possible. Just let ourselves be. Follow the breath. When you get distracted, come back. Don't get conceptual about not being able to meditate or what you were thinking about. Just be vigilant, keep coming back, keep trying to be as simple as possible. Just be one with the breath. Just be. And so meditation leads to this same direction. They all, you might say, are going the same way, which is to realize that you are a being, not a doing or a doer. That if you let yourself be, what you do will become spontaneous and will come from your own inner wisdom. The question was, would you go into that last part of the chapter about, once you have stepped foot on the path, you've really done it. You cannot step back. There's no way of escaping. And what he is talking about here is that once you start to open up, once that inner guru awakens and is following you like a shadow, you can't escape that. As he says, you've really done it now. But on the other hand, it's a very powerful spiritual path, and it leads to very excellent results. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said this one time. He said, there are other powerful spiritual paths in the world, but there are none that are more powerful than Tibetan Buddhism. And so that is a bit like what he is talking about here, that he, once again, quoting, once you begin, better to finish it. So I think most of you have taken refuge. So those of you that have taken refuge, that's the entryway to the path. You're on the path. You've done it. Congratulations.